Hey, you. Do you know that you are the most dangerous thing on Earth? Well, according to some people, you are, because you create carbon. Our obsession with carbon is everywhere. We're reminded constantly about our individual carbon footprints and what companies are doing to reduce their own.
People are always talking about reducing their carbon footprint.
We get sold offsets when we fly and love buying from net zero companies, and get guilt-tripped into planting trees or taking fewer trips if we put out too much carbon. Even Prince Charles has said he doesn't like using his helicopter anymore, saying it's not a good look when it comes to carbon. But what if this was all a lie? What if this carbon mania was created by the world's most powerful companies to help them make a lot more money? Well, unfortunately, when it comes to carbon, these what ifs are more truth than fiction. In reality, this carbon footprint thing is mostly total. And of course, like everything else I talk about on this channel, it was mostly created out of the desire to make a lot more money. So to tell a story, I'm going to take you on a dirty journey around the world, starting with the phrase carbon footprint. So how was this phrase created? You might be thinking that it's an environmental group that came up with it, or maybe a group of hippies, someone that really cared about the planet, someone that is so passionate about our environment. Well, actually, no. And I guarantee you would never guess who actually came up with this phrase. The term carbon footprint was created by these guys, British Petroleum, otherwise known as BP. The same BP that's the 5th largest producer of oil and gas products on the planet. And the very same company responsible for creating this, the 2nd largest oil spill in history. BP created the term carbon footprint in 2004 as part of a massive global advertising campaign, which they spent millions of dollars on to educate the public about their new fancy term, and also to make sure we know how much we're individually doing to damage our planet. Now you might be thinking, why is an oil company trying to get people to think about carbon when it is the oil companies that are responsible for creating a product that is putting out the carbon into the atmosphere? Well, there's a very good reason for that, and it's because BP didn't want to take the fall for it. In the early 2000s, oil companies could see the writing on the wall. The environmental movement was growing, and more pressure was being put on organizations to do the right thing for our planet. And considering oil companies are responsible for producing the product most responsible for damaging the earth, they knew they'd be the biggest targets for people's anger. So in a genius move of PR and marketing, BP decided to strike first. After creating the term carbon footprint, they were the first in the world to create a calculator that individuals could use to figure out their own carbon output. After that, they spent millions on a new advertising campaign, boasting how they were the first oil company to take steps towards addressing climate change. All of this making them seem like the good guys and laying the blame on individual people as the real source of carbon. In short, they wanted to make you believe that the problem of carbon is all your fault. And if the planet is suffering, you should not be pointing the finger at them. You should instead look in the mirror and lay blame on your polluting, disgusting self instead. And while you were doing that, thankfully BP was taking drastic action in order to reduce the amount of carbon that they were putting out themselves. Actually, no, they weren't doing any of that at all. Instead, they hired advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather to ramp up their positive climate messaging. They paid the firm $250 million to heavily promote the image that BP was a positive force fighting climate change. Ogilvy created the Helios campaign, which heavily focused on environmental messaging and promoted BP's investments in greener sources of energy. But behind the scenes, BP wasn't practicing what it was preaching. They continued to ramp up their exploration efforts, investing more to ensure that oil and gas production would continue to grow each year. And while yes, they did invest some money into new green energy products, but it was only a tiny fraction of what they invested into fossil fuels. And they actually spent more money advertising their green energy products to the public than they actually spent on creating green energy. In short, it was all a lot of public relations and not a lot of action, but unfortunately, this is not where the story ends. BP has been very vocal about implementing carbon taxes to hit polluters where it hurts, spending millions to give the appearance they want positive change, even taking out full-page newspaper ads calling to protect our environment. However, they've spent even more money making sure a carbon tax doesn't happen. In 2018, they spent $13 million lobbying against a carbon tax in just one US state. In 2019, BP spent more money lobbying against climate action than any other publicly owned company on Earth, investing $53 million to block or delay the creation of new laws that would have a positive impact on our planet. And in 2020, BP spent millions promising the public that they would significantly cut their fossil fuel output by 2030, while at the same time continuing to fund anti-climate lobby groups in nations like the United States and Australia. So basically, BP tried to blame you, for the carbon problem first, and then they brainwashed you with environmental messages so that they could conduct their dirty business as usual behind the scenes. As I've said many times on this channel before, to me, actions speak a lot louder than words, and in my opinion, BP's actions paint a very different picture to what they want you to believe about them. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Now, if you think that the rabbit hole of the carbon footprint couldn't get any deeper, think again. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but first, I just want to mention we have an epic newsletter of 65,000 people plus that are getting extra golden financial nuggets wrapped up in beautifully written stories. So there's a link below for that. Okay, so back to the story. While yes, BP was the one that created the term carbon footprint, they are definitely not the only company that is benefiting from this term today. In the past, BP and other oil giants have conspired together to slow down the production of electric cars, as well as to diminish the growth of more fuel-efficient modes of transportation and to block the use of more cleaner fuels. In 2019, Shell sent out global messaging promising to become carbon neutral by 2050, while at the same time saying that they have no choice but to continue investing in oil. So of course, oil companies are making billions of dollars investing in high carbon activities while they are trying to blame you for all of it. But here's the crazy thing. They are actually the ones responsible for creating a brand new industry that is helping them and many other people close to them become very, very rich. To help tackle the problem of carbon offsets were created. The global carbon offset market already brings in billions from well-meaning people who want to reduce their own carbon footprint. Right now, it's estimated that the market for carbon offsets is worth more than $250 billion per year and is growing at a phenomenal rate. Selling carbon offsets and carbon credits is already a highly profitable business. Just like stocks, carbon credits are traded as commodities that are bought and sold by investors for profit. In fact, one investment firm suggests that very soon, trading carbon could become the biggest market on the planet, estimating that it has the potential to grow to become 10 times larger than the entire global oil industry. In Europe, the biggest polluters in the region are already making up to 50 billion euros a year through carbon credit schemes. People are already taking advantage of the world's obsession with carbon, scamming governments who have carbon offset policies. In France, the fraud of the century saw a group swindle billions of euros from the EU's carbon trading scheme. And BP, well, as you might expect, trading carbon has become a major part of its focus, making up to 10% of its yearly trading activities and adding up to 100 million per year to its bottom line. Now, I'm not suggesting that carbon isn't an issue for our planet, but I am trying to put into perspective that whenever there is a ludicrous amount of money to be made in anything, companies almost always do what they do best, and that is to direct the narrative to helping them make as much money as they possibly can. I illustrated a perfect example of this when I made a video a few weeks ago about the plastic industry, which is linked down below. Now, is there anything actually we can do about this whole carbon thing? Well, unfortunately, this isn't actually so clear. Although oil companies want you to believe that you're the reason we have a carbon problem, in reality, most of your carbon choices are out of your hands. In most nations, over 50% of all carbon is the responsibility of decisions made by your government, things like public and military spending. And while most people would be happy to get the governments to make positive change in these areas, it's basically impossible because they're fighting against oil companies who are collectively spending billions to ensure new environmental laws never get written or passed. In reality, oil has helped advance humanity to the point we're at today, but like all technology we've outgrown, maybe it's time for us to move on to something better. Unfortunately for us, the world's oil companies are standing in the way of this progress and manipulating the market to line their own pockets for as long as they possibly can. As you can see, it's all pretty gross. Now, I'm not saying that we as individuals shouldn't be doing better and we shouldn't be taking care of the planet. Of course we should be. Say that you're in a position where you can use less oil, or you can use less plastic, or you can make less damage to the environment. Do that, and I know in your heart of hearts this is what you want to do. But do not let an oil company guilt trip you into believing that you are the source of this whole problem, while they are the ones that got us into this mess in the first place, and they continue to manipulate the truth in order to make more money for themselves. As I've always said, follow the money, because it tells a much more accurate story about the intentions of a company rather than their words ever will. And just remember,
truth is out there. but so are lies.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for watching. Just remember there is that epic newsletter link down below. If you enjoy this content and you found value out of it, please consider subscribing and also sharing it around. And lastly, until the end of July, we have the manual, our new Freedom course, available for purchase. It will not be available for 12 months after that. So there's a link in bio to find out more about that. And I'll see you in the next one.